From Drop Biscuit Studios and the people who brought you Wondery's Inside Jaws, Inside The Exorcist, and Inside Psycho comes You Talking to Me? Bite-sized Hollywood history with plenty of bite. Life after The Godfather. This is You Talking to Me? I'm Mark Ramsey. It's been about 50 years since Francis Ford Coppola created a mafia story so epic it defined the genre and instantly became the kind of cinema classic that is virtually unequaled since. Sure, Coppola went on to make a strong sequel, but don't forget about the much weaker one. And around the same immensely productive time, he also turned out The Conversation and Apocalypse Now, two of the era's best movies. But for the cast, the original Godfather would always be the movie that would mark the high point in their careers, no matter how many years they had left on the screen. Is Marlon Brando more famous for any other role? James Caan, Robert Duvall, even that intense, fresh-faced young newbie actor by the name of Al Pacino. That role of Michael Corleone almost wasn't Pacino's. He reportedly whiffed on the screen test, at least that's how Paramount chief Robert Evans saw it. Meanwhile, Martin Sheen, Dean Stockwell, even the great and way too old Rod Steiger were jockeying for the role. Warren Beatty, Dustin Hoffman both were offered the role and both turned it down. Even Jack Nicholson turned it down. I thought an Italian character should be played by someone with at least some Italian ancestry, he later said. But none of that mattered because Coppola was sold on Pacino. When I actually read the Godfather book, I kept imagining Pacino, Coppola said. And I didn't have a second choice. It was for me always Al Pacino. That's the reason why I was so tenacious about getting him to play Michael. That was my problem. Coppola would notoriously go on to oodles of problems during that complicated and adventurous and exciting era. Coppola wanted Pacino so much, the studio pulled some strings to release him from another film and open up his schedule. More than once, the studio brass was close to firing Pacino, who would later be nominated for an Oscar for the role, but Coppola kept fighting. So how does Pacino see Michael Corleone in The Godfather all these years later? It's hard to explain in today's world, Pacino said recently, to explain who I was at that time and the bolt of lightning that it was. I felt like all of a sudden some veil was lifted and all eyes were on me. Of course, they were on the others in the film, but The Godfather gave me a new identity that was hard for me to cope with. It's taken me a lifetime to accept it and move on, he said. It's not like I played Superman. Well, it's a good thing you didn't play Superman, Al, because nobody would remember you. Come to think of it, I'd love to see Al Pacino play Superman, wouldn't you? Pacino knew Coppola was one fry short of a Happy Meal. How could he be otherwise? Single-handedly fighting the studio nonstop on an expensive motion picture will do that to you when you're convinced that your way is the only way. But what were they making? Was The Godfather going to turn out to be a good film or an utter disaster? During production, the jury was out, but there was one point that Pacino knew they were onto something special. It was after shooting the funeral scene for Brando's character, Don Corleone. Pacino tells the rest. There, sitting on a tombstone, is Francis Ford Coppola, weeping like a baby, profusely crying. And I went up to him and I said, Francis, what's wrong? What happened? He says, they won't give me another shot, meaning they wouldn't allow him to film another setup. And I thought, okay, I guess I'm in a good film here, because he had this kind of passion, and there it is. Follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you're listening right now, and rate us 5 stars or forget about it. That's You Talking to Me? I'm Mark Ramsey.